Hey, so I'm Charles. I'm with Espresso Systems, and I'm here with Albert Chon, CTO and co-founder of Injective. So recently, we announced with Injective that we're going to be collaborating to integrate our Espresso sequencer with the Injective ecosystem, starting with Cascade, which is, I believe, the first SVM rollup that exists, and it's going to be deployed and settling on Injective, and we're super excited about that. But I believe that Injective does have a much bigger vision for the budding DeFi and finance rollup ecosystem on Injective. So we're here to talk a little bit more about that. Albert, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Injective's history and its mission and vision?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Charles. So, hi, everyone. I'm Albert. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Injective Labs, which is the company behind Injective, the blockchain. And yeah, so Injective, we actually started more as a layer 2 project itself on Ethereum, but due to scalability issues, mainly of Ethereum L1, settling on Ethereum L1, we decided to create Injective, the L1, the blockchain, as, using Cosmos SDK and Tendermint, which gave us a ton of flexibility and sovereignty, most importantly, over what we can do. And now we are looking to expand our developer ecosystem and the kinds of applications that can be deployed on Injective in the different execution environments, which include SVM as an example. And the idea here really is to really open up and broaden the access that developers can have to compose with Injective and build new kinds of novel DeFi applications.
I understand that. So back when, I've been following Injective, and I've been a huge fan of Injective since even before you guys started. And when you guys first released the paper, I believe it was a front-running resistant DEX using VDFs. And, I believe starting from that point, you guys released a lot of innovations. I believe you were probably the first perpetuals, decentralized perpetuals. I think you were the first decentralized order book. I'd love to hear about some of these financial applications that you're envisioning for the future of Injective and the innovations behind them.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the best mental model is, suppose Binance, like the exchange, were on a blockchain and you could interact with it, right? And right now on Injective, we do have our own smart contract execution layer called Cosmos, and we do have applications that can directly compose with the liquidity on Injective. But what we realized through talking with many developers is that the market share of Cosmos in the broader crypto space is very small, and the bar is very high, meaning you have to learn Rust, not just Rust, you have to learn specifics of the Cosmos SDK and how to handle different properties of their programming model, and it's strange or awkward, to say the least. And there's a much bigger developer audience in EVM as well as SVM that we want to enable to compose with. The problem that I think arises with interoperability, though, on a layer 2 is twofold. One is how do you even interoperate? And path that we've explored right now or exploring is IBC, which is the more straightforward approach. But then because of this asynchronous programming model, you have to split your flows into this, request response and handling that. So we were trying to solve or look into ways of having more atomic composability, which I think would be the holy grail. But of course, that also has a whole host of challenges and is, I guess, an unsolved problem, even in the shared sequencer setting. But anyways, going back to the main point, we think that, suppose Binance were a blockchain, people would go through, even in the asynchronous model, they would go through the latency, they would go through that cumbersome process to interact with it because there's something valuable to interact and transact with. So we're thinking towards the future and trying to enable that. In the beginning, yes, the latency will be probably higher because we have to go through IBC and have to wait for finality, etc. But closing that gap and eventually getting to atomic composability will be huge, because then you can have kind of a horizontally scalable or sharded architecture, and that's still interoperable.
I see. So do you see, so I guess once you have interoperability between rollups within the Injective ecosystem, then you could have, assets like INJ and other, commonly traded assets on the base chain and quickly interoperate, onto rollups and the Injective ecosystem in between them. I think starting with this SVM rollup cascade is going to be great. And then I could imagine maybe an EVM rollup and perhaps app-specific rollups for different finance applications. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. So not even just between roles, but between the rollup
Right, and other
Injective. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, yeah, even extending into the multi-chain.
Right.
That's correct. Yeah, it's obviously quite a challenge to get there. And I think you can have novel kinds of applications that, it really lowers the bar for developers. You just come and create a Solidity contract that, it composes and interacts with Injective. Right.
So given that Injective is very much finance focused, and of course MEV is a big consideration when it comes to financial applications. You've got, front running, you've got back running, you've got sandwich attacks. What are the considerations and how Injective is planning to deal with this, both at the layer 1 level as well as the layer 2 level when it comes to these rollups that are possibly going to be financial app specific?
Yeah, great question. I think I can separate my answer to two parts. One is Injective as a layer 1, and the other is, how we think about this in the layer 2 ecosystem, especially with Espresso. On the layer 1 side, to keep it short, yeah, actually, we've been thinking about MEV since 2018, back before it was even a thing. And we saw this on MEV on layer 1 on Injective in two ways. One is through market design, specifically using frequent batch options where orders are matched with a uniform clearing price at the end of the block. The other approach is by integrating Skip, which is a MEV internalization protocol, where searchers can bid for transaction bundles to be executed, and then the proceeds of that are split between the protocol and also the validator. On the layer 2 side, I think the reason why protocols like Espresso are so critical is because the tremendous amount of power that centralized sequencers would otherwise have. They can, reorder transactions to their will. They can, engage in all sorts of things like front running, back running, etc.
Censorship as well.
Censorship, of course.
Yeah. Pricing.
Yeah. And right now, the status quo of just trusting the team is not great. And so having a credibly decentralized sequencer, particularly one with this proposer-builder separation, is really important. And it's one of the most exciting reasons why we're looking forward to integrating Espresso.
I think one of the approaches that we're taking with Espresso when it comes to MEV is, well, first of all, giving rollups control over how they want to address MEV. We plan to have plugins around different approaches, such as, first come, first serve, time boost, maybe things around threshold encryption for MEV mitigation. So, really decentralizing the MEV, but also retaining power for the rollup stakeholders to control that is really a priority. So, Albert, one thing that we were discussing recently that I found really interesting was your point that Injective is one of the first sovereign L1s that is building its own rollup ecosystem. And, given Injective and its constraints compared to that of Ethereum, we're actually able to make protocol level changes to Injective as an L1 and a settlement layer for rollups, such that, we have a big design space on how we could modify the consensus to make rollups function better on Injective. What are some of your ideas around that?
Yeah, as I was saying before about not having a overly dogmatic view about how to integrate rollups, I think this is where Espresso and its modularity really fit in nicely. And some of the changes that Injective, for example, could make surround getting closer to atomic composability, or at least interoperability. And one example of which is, suppose we could kind of enshrine the rollup on Injective, as in each of the validators on Injective also, let's say, are part of the decentralized sequencer network on Espresso. Then you could have them attest to, let's say, the header state information on the L2 to Injective, and that way you can, and once at least 2/3 of those validators have done that, you can, for example, bypass the fraud-proof window. And if you go even a step further, if you do this in concert, you could even potentially have atomic composability between the rollup and Injective. Of course, this would introduce tie in basically the rollup into Injective in a stronger way. You can also perhaps a bit more burden on validators, but that's something that we could consider because it would give us all these nice properties and benefits.
Yeah, I see that as very, very interesting. You'd be taking advantage of the larger validator set that the larger sequencer set behind Espresso, but also, this could be implemented outside of the Espresso sequencing protocol, but within Injective itself to get those advantages around interoperability, quick finality. So that would be a very, very interesting experiment.
Yeah, and it's also great that Espresso also gives you such fast finality that we can really work to minimize this latency.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think coupled with things such as like restaking that we're doing with Ethereum, I think getting all-in validators invested and aligned with rollups is really critical. So that's a really great idea. I look forward to trying that out.
Yeah, well, we're in good hands to work on really experimental technology with some of your team.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it's been a real pleasure catching up with you, Albert. We've been working hard on our plans for integration with not just Cascade, but also the upcoming rollup ecosystem on Injective. And it's been great working with your team and getting all the design feedback.
Yeah, likewise. I think Espresso is probably one of the most talented teams in crypto in the rollup space, and really excited to see what we'll do together.